Well, sticking with the two that have already reported, Microsoft and Alphabet reported strong cloud computing revenue, proving businesses are still spending big, but growth has slowed compared to peak rates in 2021. So what does the future look like for cloud tech? Joining us now, we've got Ted Mortensen, who is the Baird technology strategist. And Ted, great to have you here with us this morning, first and foremost. When I looked at these numbers, and especially zeroed in on Alphabet's numbers particularly, it was noteworthy the growth that they saw in their cloud division, as well as the profitability, even at a time where we were talking about coming into this earnings season, it being an environment of more deal scrutiny. Interested in what you make of that and what this really kind of sets forth in terms of the growth narrative that these companies have really been pitching to the street and to customers.
Well, I think what you're seeing a rationalization of really cloud spend by the Global 2000. I mean, we had a huge peak due to application loads during COVID. That is moderated, and you can see it both in the Microsoft and Google numbers. If you look at Microsoft, your previous guest summed it up well. The previous quarter, they grew 38%. They guided to 31%, and they hit that number, and that was better than feared by the street. They guided forward Azure growth at 26 to 27%. So you are seeing that moderation. This is all before you integrate generative AI, so that's a positive. As it relates to Google, I would somewhat challenge the thought process that Google is behind. They pioneered AI with DeepMind, and they just rolled out Bard. They are holding a lot of cards here, and I think to some degree, the street may be leaning one way. These are two brilliant companies with unbelievable managements, and generative AI is going to affect every single industry for the next decade. It's probably one of the largest technology evolutions I've seen in my 30-year career of doing technology. And as an engineer, it is a feat, not only on the silicon side, but on the software side. I think what happens tomorrow with Amazon is incredibly important for the tape. Last quarter, they grew 20%. The street has a very negative bias on their channel checks on Amazon in relationship to AWS growth. And I think this is going to be a very important report tomorrow. Also, the street is very, very focused, not only on AWS growth rate, but for Amazon, this is a major contributor to operating margin. AWS contributed almost $5.2 billion of profitability last quarter with operating margins of 24.3%. That engine's got to keep going to fuel the investment that Amazon's doing on their core e-commerce.
So, Ted, let's talk about then the three big cloud players, given what you're saying about AWS, because my read through from Microsoft and Alphabet was that companies are still spending on cloud, right? Not going up at the same rate, obviously, but the spending is not being eroded as much as we might have anticipated, given that it's the quote unquote year of efficiency for many companies. Are we not going to see that same effect in AWS? Does AWS not have the same kind of bolt-on services for cloud that the other players do? Or could they potentially surprise to the upside also?
They could. And again, sentiment is pretty negative here on the AWS print. I think with AWS, you also have to realize in their infancy of cloud, the private companies were a very big contributor for AWS. When you were in the Silicon Valley and doing a startup, your cloud infrastructure build was directly to Amazon. And I think post Silicon Valley's failure, that smaller component now on the private side is definitely seeing some pressure. Now, with that said, you look at these three clouds, AWS, Azure, and GCP, they are true monopolies. They're worldwide monopolies outside of China and Baidu and Alibaba. They're holding 90+% of the AI engineers. And as you move into generative AI, these three companies are going to be the leaders in a paradigm shift, not only in search, but across all industries as software changes. And Microsoft is incredibly well positioned because of their enterprise reach. And I think Dan summed it up very, very well, where when you look at Microsoft, they're already commercializing AI with what's called Copilot, and Copilot's being commercialized on the developer with GitHub. It's being commercialized on security with their E5 offering. It's through Dynamics. Microsoft is actually rolling it out to the enterprise right now, and I think that's their core advantage, at least in the near term.
You know, the way of thinking among some of their portfolio clients in the past would be, all right, if we've already got our collaborative cloud suite with this company, then we might as well kind of have a data center that's housed by this company as well, kind of just summarizing everything up in one bill, if you will. Is that still the way of thinking? Are companies looking to piecemeal together a broader kind of cloud solution for themselves, or are they kind of picking and choosing? And if so, is there a clear winner right now among some of the largest cloud players that you're tracking?
That's $1 million question. It's a great question. I think if you look AWS being kind of the number one cloud player historically, and Azure being number 2, and GCP being number 3, and Oracle's OCI being a distant 4. Right now, this is a battle between Microsoft and Google. Microsoft, again, has the enterprise, which is a huge advantage. All corporate enterprises, essentially, their foundation is Microsoft. And as you look at their roadmap, it is a scary roadmap. It's almost kind of like the technology Death Star, if you will. Microsoft is incredibly brilliant management that executes. And in that respect, I think as you move into generative AI, they've been working with OpenAI for years and a huge investment. OpenAI is powered by NVIDIA. It sits on Azure. That's a pretty big initial advantage in this next war, and it is a generational paradigm. So I would say Microsoft is holding a lot of cards right now.
Just super quickly, Ted, does the lack of Activision affect that Death Star ability?
No, it's a bolt-on that. It's a bolt-on, quite frankly, that would have been nice to move their whole gaming business to the cloud. But the core IP within Microsoft is fueling multiple product cycles currently.
So I guess I don't know what the vulnerability was, that you shoot the photons down into the middle and the whole thing blows up. I don't know what the analogy only goes so far. Ted Mortensen, thank you so much. We love that analogy, though. Baird technology strategist. Great to get some time with you this morning. Thanks.